Hi guys, welcome to my Las Vegas recap. If you didn't know, I was at the regional qualifier for Las Vegas this past weekend. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my experience at Las Vegas. I'll talk about the deck that I brought there, a few different decks depending on which tournament I was in, and also how, like, reflection on the deck I brought and how I probably would change it if I had a little bit more time testing in Spirit Forge. It really was quite an experience of all time. As I'll show in, it was a roller coaster of emotion, honestly. But let's get into it. First, the venue was great. I personally didn't think there were any issues with the venue. I don't think it was that crowded in there. And it was nice and cool. It wasn't too crowded. My only complaint would be that there was like one main bathroom for the entire event, which was kind of crazy. But later on, they realized that was an issue and opened up a few other bathrooms near the venue hall. So they kind of fixed that, although it was still bad. This is me. The standard competitor badges were pretty nice. I got the standard competitor badge. It was just what I got, and it was pretty good, smooth process to pick it up, and a pretty smooth process to get in as well. I loved how they decorated the place. They have all these cutouts or like these screens of all the different legends, and they also had a bunch of figures on display, which was really cool to look at. If you guys do want like a more like there are YouTube videos with like walkthroughs of the entire event, so if you're more curious about that, feel free to look those up on YouTube. This is where the show matches happen. If you only watch the streams, you might be a little bit curious to see what the actual tables look like for the show matches, and this is what they look like. I was hoping maybe I could get on stream for one of my matches, but I think I kind of fumbled my first few stages and I kind of lost my opportunity to do so, which was a shame, but I was fine. Wait, why does it say Houston in the middle? I did not notice that until now. Why does it still say Houston in the middle? That is so funny. I never noticed that until now. Oh my god. I took this picture, I'm pretty sure. So that's really funny to see. And this display was really cool. This is for all the prizes for like the winner and all the best of legends. You can see Viktor at the bottom left. This was as close as I got to the best of metal card. Spoilers. But also the playmat's pretty cool. I know a lot of people love this playmat, but the trophy and the plaque is really cool as well. It was really cool to see the Metal Legends in person. And also I got like a regular play legend of Volibear during my event, and those they're pretty cool. They're like hefty, which like of course they are, like they're metal, but it was still surprising how like solid and like heavy they are. But yeah, let's talk about the pre-regional challenge. This, if you don't know, is just like a it's like a event that happens on Friday. But so the main event starts on Saturday. This is just like a side tournament that happens on Friday where you could just get tickets for different prizes, like the regular play legends. And this was just honestly a chance for everybody to be practicing their decks, do some final testing on for before the main event. And honestly, I like performed so much worse than I thought I would. I ended up going 2-3. Um I beat an Irelia and Lucian, but I lost to Ezreal, which was Alan ZQ. I can't believe I paired into him in round 2 of the pre-regional challenge, which was a crazy experience. Unfortunately, I haven't played against many Ezreal players, or I haven't played against his deck type of Ezreal players. I've only played against like Rat Ezreals or like the standard control Ezreals like before his list. So I wasn't 100. Like I've seen his deck list from Bologna. If you didn't know, Alan ZQ is the winner of the Bologna regional qualifier. So I've seen his deck list, but I haven't actually experienced it personally. And I think I could have won the first game against him if I just had more knowledge about how to play against Ezreal. Because I kept walking into um, arcane shifts, like just giving him an easy way to do so. If I just ordered my cards differently, I could have completely avoided it. And I actually managed to deck him out in my first game with a hidden blade. But unfortunately, I was only at like 5 points, so it got me from 5 to 6 points, and then I lost the game pretty shortly after. But honestly, crazy game. I've never decked anyone else out before, but his deck list kind of does that to himself, where he gets to like a very few number of cards in his deck, And if I just play a hidden play, I could force him to deck out. So that was really cool. But after I lost to Alan ZQ, I lost to two other Dravens, which was kind of a bummer, I guess. But man, the Dravens in this tournament were brutal for me to go against. But yeah, let's talk about my deck list. Um, before I talk about any of my deck lists, I would not really recommend them in hindsight, because as I started making my Spearforge decks, which I didn't have much time to, I only figured out I was going to Las Vegas a week and a half before the event, and I'm mostly like a practice at locals kind of guy, so I didn't have much time to practice and to hone in my decks. But this is what I brought to the pre-regional challenge. And you could tell that like it was kind of a mess just based off of how many like one-ups I have. I have one Rocket Barrage, one Sprite Mother, one Drag Under, one Riptide Rex, one Harness Dragon. And typically I like to avoid that as much as possible, but I was honestly just being really indecisive of what cards I wanted to bring. You could see that I am running Blue Victor here. And this was because I started off with like my set 1 Victor list, and I just took out a few cards, put in a few new cards, and I did that repeatedly. But every single time I made new changes to the deck list, I just ended up taking out more units and putting more spells back in. And although I really love my yellow Victor, it came to a point where I was like, I don't really see any non-units or non-recruit units dying that often, like with a yellow Victor in play. Because my only small units I have were Card Sharps, Faithful Manufacturers, Lecturing Yordles, and maybe a Sprite Mother. And it's gonna be hard to see like what some of my bigger units dying with a yellow Victor on board. So I ultimately switched to blue Victor and I added in a few other small spells like the Blood Money or the Salvage. And yeah, this is what I ran. A little bit of justification for why I ran a few things. I kept going back and forth between Blood Money and Retreat. I just wanted some way to ramp. Over here I ran Blood Money, but honestly, I'm not a big fan of Blood Money. It's just so hard for it to actually work because of like spinning axes, like buff spells from green, or just other shenanigans that I don't know if like my blood money even resolved like half of the time. And so I think I'm a big more of a fan of just running retreats, which is what I switched to. I'm a firm believer of salvage in the main board in this set, and I run two of them because there are very few matchups where salvage has like actually no targets. Those few matchups being like Kaisa if they don't run assembly rig, the Annie matchup, although they might run like a random longsword, or the Victor matchup, the mirror, if they're not running Vanguard Army. But besides those, you're typically not gonna have equipment you can target, like Last Rites or just other stat stick equipments. You could find Guardian Angels, Zanyas, Seals are also pretty fine. So I'm a firm believer that salvage, you should have at least one. I run two in the main board, and I really haven't disliked it during my entire time at the regional qualifier. Some other cards like three Color Weeks is non-negotiable for Victor list. Three Hidden Blades also non-negotiable. Stupefy is also just like you just need to have it. The Bellows Breath Imperial Decree combo is like required as well. Although how many Imperial Decrees and also how many Thousand Tail Watchers is also up for debate. I found in my later tournaments that the three Watchers was a little bit too much. It kind of clogged on my hand a lot at times, and so I cut it down to two in future lists. The card sharp I loved because it helped me ramp really well, but sometimes it just sucks to also give my opponent a gold. And it's also kind of like a really slow card. So I phased out this card throughout the tournament as well. Faithful Manufacturer, not really much to say here. Getting this on turn 1 if you have 3 energy is just fantastic. It really allows you to put pressure on your opponent. I had 3 Lecturing Yordles because I just wanted to see like draw a lot of cards and get a body. And I just thought I preferred Lecturing Yordle over like a Watchful Sentry. To help me find like my combo pieces of the Bellows Breath plus Imperial Decree or a Bellows Breath plus the Thousand Tail Watcher. Wages of Pain, I just ran 2 of. A lot of the other lists ran 3, so maybe that was the better move. but it is nice that you get to kill some small units. I feel like sometimes it can be hard to find a unit that you're just gonna straight out kill with the 3 damage. But the gold is really nice to help me play my future cards. Rocket Barrage is mainly put into these lists to target some of these pesky smaller units that just like to live in base. Like Lucian, Orange Lucian, like Purple Ezreals, like a Stellar Corn Herder maybe. Even dealing 4 damage is pretty good this set, so it could also kill like Red Dravens, Kaisas, and a lot of other high value targets. Stats wise, it's pretty poor, but it's just like because 4 energy, 1 power for 4 damage in base is not great, but it just honestly does exactly what you need it to. So it's like why it's run. I think I mentioned this in my previous video, but I was a big believer of Sprite Mother over the Xinjiao because I just valued having a body in base and a body at the battlefield. But it seemed that all the other lists are preferring Xinjiao, and they're also running Glass Mixologist to recur Xinjiao, which is like a big benefit outside of the obvious ones of being cheaper and like a bigger single body than Sprite Mother. But being able to be recurred by the Glass Mixologist was something I haven't really considered. So the Sprite Mother would probably be getting cut in my future versions of my list, but I'm also not quite sure how the other top performing Victor lists are like their playstyle yet. Drag Under is just a nice action speed card to be able to kill a unit. It's great if you could target this, use this to target like Kaisas or like just units with accelerate, or even if you could use this on a Ferris Forerunner that's pushing into a battlefield, then you deny them both the conquer, and you could on your turn, um, probably use some other spells to kill their 2, 3 might mech tokens. So that's another great way to use the drag under. Riptide Rex is just a very reliable way to kill some units at battlefields. The only problem is that a hidden fight or flight could dodge the 6 damage. And that's why I also have one Harness Dragon, because A, Harness Dragon dodges fight or flights, because it can target anywhere, and also dodges Unyielding Spirit. So I tried running Harness Dragon because Victor does get to these higher rune counts in set 2 in general, but I think Harness Dragon is still a little bit too expensive to be better than Riptide Rex. And of course, my old reliable Singularity, a very reliable card. You do have to be careful about not so fast and Unyielding Spirit. But besides those, your Singularities are pretty much guaranteed to hit. So one of my favorite cards of all time. In my sideboard, I have my third Salvage, which is great for playing against equipment heavy decks. Pickpockets to steal either worst case scenario gold, best case scenario seals, and also like some one energy equipment like a Cull or a Eye of the Herald or Doran's Shield. So any of those are pretty good targets for Pickpocket. These are just different balancing things, and a Vengeance to just kind of be able to target more high value units that are in base, like an Irelia, for instance. On day 2 was the actual regional qualifier. I started off pretty strong with a 3-0, getting my round 1 bye from a skirmish win. Played against Miracle Jings and Irelia without much of an issue. But a few of these matchups were pretty crazy. Against the Kaisa matchup, and let me tell you, like my version of Victor versus Kaisa, it is just constant removal of both of our units, and whoever just runs out first loses. And I thought I would be favored in this, like, I thought I would be, like, really favored in this matchup because I have an infinite source of units, aka my recruits. But these Kaiser lists have a lot of removal, man. And, like, all of their small removal is good enough to kill all my recruits. So even though I would typically get a point lead really quick, it was really hard to close out games it would be really hard to close out games. And let me tell you, in this Kaisa matchup, I think I got time warped. Yeah, I got time warped 3 times over the course of these 2 games. I got double time warped in game 1, and I got time warped in game two, and there was not really much I could do. Well, the first game I didn't play around the double time warp because I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't thinking about it. The second game there was not really much I could do because I was just running out of removal to kill all of their stuff, like their Ferris Forerunners and all that. Then I lost another game to mid-range Draven, which is unfortunate. Round six, I learned my lesson on how to play the Kaisa matchup, and I actually came out on top that time. And on round seven, I actually lost to an Irelia, which was pretty surprising because I thought it was a matchup that I was pretty confident in. It's by no means, I think it's a pretty Viktor favorite matchup, but it's just a very high variance matchup because it's always like, okay, do I have my kill spells? If yes, maybe I win. But do they have the counter spells? If yes, maybe I don't win. And so it's just really all about your mulligan and what cards you're starting off with. And that just plays like a big part. There is some skill expression to like when you rip your cards. But if you just have the cards, you will win. If you don't, you will lose. That's how, kind of how that matchup feels like. In terms of changes to my deck, after the pre-regional challenge, and after I went 2-3, it was like I was so cat despair. I expected myself to do a lot better than a 2-3 finish. So I was so sad when I went to my hotel and I had to submit my deck list for the main event. And so I made a few changes which were probably an improvement overall. I took out the blood monies, I put in the retreats. I somehow snuck in a face breaker there, which did pretty good work. I thought 3 card shots were a little bit too much because they were clogging up my hand when I was drawing them in the late game, so I bumped it down to 2. And I added some pickpockets in the main board and bumped down Lecturing Yordles by 1 as well. Besides that, I moved the Harness Dragon to the sideboard, brought in another Riptide Rex, because I thought just the cheapness was just valuable. And then my sideboard is just like this toolbox of like ratio fixing for me. When I brought in the pickpocket, I should have done the smart thing that most other Victor players were doing, where I run Treasure Hoard as my first battlefield, so that even if my opponent don't have valid targets for me to hit with pickpocket, if they ever decide to generate a gold, I could just steal that gold. But I used to run Treasure Hoard when I first started Spirit Forge, but once again, it just felt like the Draven matchup could use it better than I could, so I dropped it. But on day 3, I brought back the Treasure Hoard in, and this was what I ran for day 3. I sided in a Time Warp into my side deck specifically for the Kaisa matchup. But it honestly could work for a lot of other slower matchups as well, like an Ezreal matchup, where we're both not really doing much. I'm just generating a recruit and trying to push it in while they just remove it. So what I could do is I'll have the runes to play Time Warp in those matchups. So I could side them in, try to just sneak in a recruit into a battlefield and then play Time Warp and potentially win. So I don't put it in my main board, but I could definitely see it as a sideboard piece. Besides that, there weren't too many changes from day 2, I think. I think I took out another card sharp for 3 pickpockets in main, now that I added Treasure Hoard. But besides that, round 1, I lost to Miracle Draven, which kind of sucked. But then I went on a pretty good win streak of beating Irelia, Misfortune, Ezreal, Irelia. But unfortunately, in the last round of the region rebound, I got paired up against an Azir, which before going into this tournament was one of the matchups I was afraid of the most because I didn't really know how I was supposed to beat Azir when they have access to summon a lot of bodies pretty reliably. If they have an equipment, they could just summon a Sand Soldier, which is better value than Victor's recruits. And they could also just play a Rise for pretty cheap to summon a lot more units. So I managed to dodge the matchup throughout the entire weekend, but finally, for my last match ever, I got paired into one, and it felt kind of as bad as I feared. Because I tried to just run them out of cards, but whenever they play cards like Discipline or Death Grip, they get out of all of my ranges, and there's not really much I could do because all those cards replace themselves, and so my opponent would always have always have a hand to play it with. But yeah, so After looking at all of the performing lists of Las Vegas, I'm gonna go back into like the think tank a bit, look at what their deck lists are doing, and try to like see what they're doing. So like let's look at them together. This was the best of Viktor list, and they ran. Hold on a second. Oh yeah, they ran Raven Blue Conservatory, Treasure Hoard, Void Gate, which are pretty standard battlefields. Um, what I didn't mention earlier was that I actually cut out 2 drops from my deck because I was playing this really slow version of Victor. I didn't care if I ran or if I played a recruit or like a 2 drop because like I wasn't trying to be too aggressive in the early game. And even against other slower decks, my recruits are still aggressive enough to get conquering points, so I didn't really see that much value in the 2 drops. Even though I would love to have a Plundering Poro or Honest Brokers in my deck to give me more gold, but I decided it wasn't really worth it for the sake of consistency in my deck overall. But you can see that all the other lists do run it. These lists aren't terribly different. Besides the fact that the best of by custom dipped, he ran Yellow Victor like all of the other top placing Victors did. He ran Victor, a few 2 drops, Pickpockets, Faithful Manufacturers, and they ran Xinjiao, which was the main deviation from my deck list. And they also run Glass Mixologist to recur, mostly Xinjiaos, depending on the matchup, Pickpockets or Faithful Manufacturers as well. And they have more in the sideboard as well. I'm personally not yet sold on the Glass Mixologist yet, but like I said, I haven't tested this deck list yet. I'll be doing so in the near future, and in a future video, I'll be talking about if I like it or some changes that I would make. But remember, like they are the ones that like won best of and performed well at Vegas, so their opinion is probably more valuable than mine in the current state because I just haven't had that much time to really do research on Spirit Forge. But it's something that I am like focusing on. But besides that, it's the pretty standard list of spells. Although they run one timer main, I think this is more feasible in set 2 than it was in set 1 because of the treasure hoard and all of these sources of gold that we're finding. And I feel like you would side this out for most matchups when you're not on the treasure hoard game 1. Because I think it might be difficult to get to 10 energy and 4 mind runes. Or actually, the mind runes isn't the problem, but it might be difficult to get to 10 energy otherwise. But when you're on treasure hoard, it could definitely be a lot more feasible. Yeah. This was another list by Danix. I believe this is the second place Victor. This is, oh, I should say that these lists are almost identical to the Bologna best of list. So there's not that much different between this list and this list, I guess. They took out a Plundering Poro and they took out the Glass Mixologist from the main board. So a few different things that actually this deck list is pretty different. No Time Warp, they have Consult the Pass. They have a Facebreaker, a Salvage and Bane. Yeah. A few differences, but the same general game plan is going to be the same. They also have a Zon Punk as gear removal, which is really funky. But yeah. But like the same general game plan is going to be similar. Honest Broker, Pickpocket, Shinjiao, Riptide Rex, Thousand Tail Watcher. I think my biggest mistake was undervaluing Shinjiao, I guess. This is by Linsanity. I know that he was on stream for one of his games. I believe this is also pretty similar to the... Ooh, actually, they run Progress Days, which I have never really felt like I was in a position where I can play Progress Day. And that's why I just run more lecturing yordles. But I guess they managed to make it work somehow. Because me personally, I would just run Consult the Pass over Progress Days, but I guess some people prefer the more explosive draw, even at the higher cost. And lastly, this is the list by Man10, which is Cody Williams, the Houston best of Viktor. And I think this list is probably most similar to mine. It might be because we both started off at the same place, where at the end of Origins, we were running, I was just running a modified version of his list. And maybe we got to a similar place because we started off at the same place, but only difference is that he kept the 2 drops, he put in a Shinjao, and went a little bit lighter on the removal, it seems. And also Shannon the Cyber, which is interesting, with Machine Evangel. Machine Evangel probably good into some removal matchups like Kaisa or maybe even Ezreal, although it would really suck if it gets rebuked. But yeah. But yeah, those are the other Viktor lists that I just want to show you. I'll probably put a link to all those lists in the description. But something else I want to cover are some special rulings from Bologna or Las Vegas that you should know about. Riftbound is kind of notorious right now for having the text or the rules be poorly written. And so for a lot of casual players, it could be really confusing to stay up with all the news on the common rulings that are coming up. So I want to point out a few of them that have either come up in Bologna or Las Vegas or have become like relevant or just in general that you as a Victor player should know about. The first one is going to be about Jack's Legend. Jack's Legend's second let's actually pull it up. So Jack's Legend's second ability says attach and attach equipment you control to a unit you control. And that allows you to take an equipment that's on a unit and reattach it to the same unit for essentially free. The only cost would be tapping your legend. And why that's important are because the cards like Brutalizer, which has an effect when you attach it that turn. Did I not spell this? No, I did. So you could give your Brutalizer a permanent +2 might for every single turn. And the other card that it's really relevant on is Aphelios, because when you attach cards to Aphelios, he has a certain trigger. And so that's something you should know about. You don't need to detach and reattach an equipment to a unit because when you attach an attached unit, when you attach an attached equipment, by default, by definition in the rules, it says you detach and then reattach it. And that's relevant because Jax actually got top 8 at Las Vegas, which I have been saying that Jax was a good legend for the longest time. Yeah, my friends will confirm this mostly because I pulled the signature of Aphelios, and I was kind of thinking where signature Aphelios would slot in, and then it slots into a Jax deck better than any other deck. And so I like theory crafted a Jax deck, and I was like, this looks pretty good. This looks playable. I didn't bring it to Houston because orange green is very far from my expertise of colors, and like it's just a completely different mid-range playstyle. But I had a feeling that it was Jax could cook, and it did cook. The other ruling is time warp and overtime. In current overtime rules, when time is up, the current player is turn 0, and then you go back and forth between being turns 1, 2, and 3, and the player going turn 3 is going to be the last turn. If you play time warp in overtime, you do not get an extra turn. That time warp does essentially nothing because there is no extra turn to be had. If you play time warp on as turn 2 player, you can actually steal your opponent's turn 3. Yeah, because time warp doesn't give you an extra turn, it just gives you the next turn. I hope that makes sense. The last thing is about the interaction between fading memories and attached equipment. When you attach an equipment, its main text goes away. So for example, let's pull up Brutalizer again. When you attach an equipment, this text in the white box, it disappears. And this green portion at the bottom is the only part of the equipment that is actually active. So when you give an equipment temporary, it's going to go into this slot like it is for spinning axe. And so even if you give an equipment temporary, it will not die at the start of its turn. If it's equipped, Because if it's equipped, the temporary is disabled, similar to how spinning axes can stay on enemy units even though it has a temporary tech. Because this text over here doesn't exist, the only thing that does exist would be this +3. So that was a really, it makes sense if you think about it, but if you haven't thought about it, it will probably really catch you off guard. So that's something else to know about. The other thing are Imperial Decree shenanigans. So I actually set up an example for you and how you can use Imperial Decree to its maximum value in certain situations. So ignore the fact that my opponent has a million cards. If, for example, let's say I just have a bunch of runes, Imperial Decree is a delayed trigger, okay? So there's a few downsides to this. For example, let's just pretend our opponent is Draven right now real quick. And let's just say that this GA was like non-attached. If I push in a recruit, so let's say I play Imperial Decree and it resolves and I push in a recruit. And let's just pretend my opponent is Draven real quick. Even though these two units will trade with each other, how it actually happens is that during combat, the recruit will deal 1 damage to the Stellarcorn Herder, and then the Stellarcorn Herder will deal 1 damage to the 3 damage to the recruit. So the recruit will die because 3 might is more than 1. But when the recruit deals 1 damage to the Stellarcorn Herder, it just flags the Stellarcorn Herder that it needs to die. But after they deal its damage, it doesn't actually die yet. Combat finishes first, so if my opponent was a Draven, they would actually draw a card, and then Imperial Decree would trigger, killing the Stellarcorn Herder after that. So both units will still die at the end, but it doesn't actually count as a combat, or it still counts as a combat win for the Draven, because Imperial Decree triggers after combat has been resolved. But there are a few ways that you can use this to advantage. Let's say that we cast Imperial Decree and it resolves. Because Imperial Decree triggers after like damage has been dealt and like cleanup has occurred, I think. This is how you can use that to your advantage. If we, for example, play Bellows Breath on these two units at base, what will first happen is we're just playing Bellows Breath 1 without the repeat. It will deal 1 damage to both the Treasure Hunter and the Stellarcorn Herder. And then Imperial Decree will flag both of those units to be killed later on. But it doesn't happen yet. Before the Imperial Decree happens, we dealt 1 damage to the Treasure Hunter, so the Treasure Hunter will die, which will proc the Zanyas. So it'll die and proc Zanyas instead. And then also 1 damage will be dealt to the Stellarcorn Herder. And so both of these are still flagged for the Imperial Decree, even though Treasure Hunter proc the Zanyas. And so now Imperial Decree will resolve, and it'll actually kill both of these units as well in base. Another way you can use it is, let's say we have an Imperial Decree active, and there's like a 4 might body with a GA, or a Zanyas in base, or a set legend at a battlefield. We can push in with a Riptide Rex here. And Riptide Rex has more might than the Stellarcorn Herder. And assuming that nothing else happens besides the Imperial Decree, so there are no other spells played during combat, what will happen is that Riptide Rex will deal 6 damage to the Stellarcorn Herder, and because Stellarcorn Herder took damage, it will be flagged by Imperial Decree to die. But before the Imperial Decree triggers once again, the Stellarcorn Herder will take 6 damage from the Riptide Rex, killing it, popping its GA, and then Imperial Decree will trigger, killing the Stellarcorn Herder and the Riptide Rex. So using Imperial Decree, you could use these strategies to kill through Guardian Angels, Zanyas, set legend abilities, things like that. So that's just something to be aware of. Very important for playing Viktor. Lastly, I just want to give like a recap of my Las Vegas experience. It really was a roller coaster of emotions. After the pre-regional, I thought it was so doomed. I was so upset that I ended with a 2-3 record. But honestly, when I just had some good sleep and woke up the next day, I felt so much better. I actually felt pretty good going into the regional qualifier with my slightly modified deck. But besides on Friday at the regional at the pre-regional, I felt pretty good for the rest of my tournament, even though I didn't do as well that I was hoping for. But still, this was my first time attending such like a large-scale TCG tournament. My only other one would be the Atlanta one that I went to. And it was also my first time competing in this like pro level setting. You could argue that like the 10K Atlanta is like similar, but I think it was so different. Like the scale is on a whole nother level. And it was also like my first time attending like a Riot or just any video game conference like this, so it's a really cool experience, and I had a lot of fun attending there. Some other things was, oh my god, every single round, and I do mean every single round on all 3 days, I think went at least 30 minutes over time. I'm pretty sure, without exaggeration, I might have been waiting longer than I've actually been playing throughout the entire weekend combined. So Riot really does need to figure out something about the time rules. It's a mixture of miracle decks taking forever on their turn, like not because it's their fault, just because they're performing so many actions per turn, and also deck checks taking a really long time. I've had some deck checks take the people next to me like 20 minutes, which is insane. And like if it's taking 20 minutes to do a deck check, of course you're going that much over time. And there's just like a lot of like disputes that are going on and taking a while for the judges to resolve and things like that too. But I hope that Riot will figure out some ways to help alleviate that issue in the future. Also, thank you to everyone who actually came up to me and talked to me. I didn't really expect anybody to talk to me at this place. I guess it is like where the biggest fans of Rebound do meet up. But I've had like maybe 5 people walk up to me and ask me, "Hey, are you Tokebi?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I am." And everybody just talked about what I was up to, what I was doing. So I actually really appreciate it, especially when I wasn't like doing it so hot at the tournament. It was really comforting to have people like talk to me and talk about Viktor, talk about what my plans are. And so I really did appreciate that. And the last thing before I sign off for today is just my future plans. One of the main reasons that like I don't think I did that well was because I just didn't have time to adjust to this new meta. Like I said earlier, I found out that I was going to Vegas a week and a half before Vegas, so I didn't really have a lot of time to prepare. But now that I know, I made it into Atlanta, which is great because Atlanta is a really convenient city for me to go visit. But I'm gonna take my time over the next month and a half ish that I have, and I'm gonna practice my deck and really grind to do better in Atlanta, and hopefully I get like a top 64 finish there, at least day 2. Okay, that's the goal. That's the goal here. But yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Um, I'll talk more about like the future list that I'll be running. I'll be testing out the best of lists or the best performing list and see which one I think is good, which one is maybe not so good. I am a bit sick right now, so it might take a bit, but thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.